These are patterns related to a particular way of being in the world. They're neurological, biological, physical, mental, somatic, but they're not a life sentence. They can be changed with presence, with paying attention, with intention. There are many ways of supporting that shift so that we can move from the way that we were boxed in to a much more expansive experience of ourselves and others around us.
Since the 1990s, Roxanne Howe-Murphy has served as a teacher and retreat facilitator, executive transition and spiritual coach. She is an author and the founder of Deep Living Lab. In her work, she uses Enneagrams as an entree into greater self-knowledge. When are you acting with presence versus personality? How important is it to cultivate heart-based wisdom? What is intuition? These questions and more in this podcast. Roxanne, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Thanks, Pat. I'm so glad to be with you. Well, let me start with kind of where the change in my life came. I want to say that what I experienced was not so much a bump in the road as a dip. and the dip was pretty extended, and sometimes I felt like it was maybe in the canyon. but my dip was not being able to find my energy, not thinking that I had much to offer, not finding my mojo, not even though I was active and I was teaching at the university. I loved what I was doing, but there was something that was kind of depressing me. And it was a form of depression that I just didn't, recognize at the time. And it was associated with, of course, a lot of stories about worth or lack of, whether it even mattered that I had a voice, whether it even mattered that I was here. Not in a suicidal ideation kind of way, but just that question, like, what does it matter? And so I continued, with my teaching and what I was doing, which I loved, but there was something else was also arising for me, that there's something else for you. There's something else. And so I had kind of this, this back and forth, this yin yang, push pull, like, there's nothing here for me. And then this part, like, there is something that's trying to come through. What is it? And I had my own coach at the time, and I was studying with also more coaching, coaching program. And he said, why don't you take a look at this book on the Enneagram? And I knew something about the Enneagram, like way back, like in the 80s, I think was when I first saw my book, a book, and I went, oh, I don't like this. And I thought, this feels negative, and it feels like, well, I already work with a lot of assessment tools. I had worked with the different assessment tools as a coach, and so what does this have to offer? So I let it be, put it away. And then now I'm in this new coaching program, an additional coaching program. And the teacher also happens to be my coach. And he said, take a look at this approach. And so it was Wisdom of the Enneagram by the late now Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson, who became two of my teachers. And when I read that book, it hit me that, what is happening for me is it's right here. I mean, how I'm seeing my life and what's going on is so close to me that I can't see it clearly. Yeah. It was so ingrained, like my wallpaper, psychic wallpaper. And so I ended up studying with them. I went to my first my first week workshop was a Friday night. It was in a lovely setting. There were 60 or so people in the room, and I still didn't really understand what this work was about. And it was, the focus was on the Enneagram, excuse me. And I heard one of the teachers say something that just blew me away. And then I felt, this is what happened. I felt invisible hands on my shoulders. And this is a very out of the ordinary experience for me. Hands on my shoulders. And I heard these words, "This is your work." And I felt this shaking again. And it was like, it's gentle shaking, but it was clearly like something's going on here, right? This is your work. And I had tears rolling down my face. This is a first night of a week-long retreat. People I didn't know. I'm going to have tears running down my face. And I said silently, yes, having no idea what I was saying yes to. And I've been very committed to this work ever since, because I'm hard to get through to, Pat, on some levels.
Welcome to the club.
And I've had a few of these experiences kind of since then. That's like, okay, she's really hard to get through to. Let's try this route. She can't ignore it. And so this started me focusing on understanding, first of all, myself and seeing myself more clearly for the first time in my life. I had never seen what I was recognizing. It's like, oh, I just thought that's who I am. And that's what most people experience if they kind of land on the space, in the map of consciousness that I call, the Enneagram. If they land on the space that they most resonate with, which is sometimes called a type, often called a type, that you think it's like, this is impossible because no, everybody does this, right? Or this is just me, this is just me. This doesn't describe a type, for heaven's sakes. Well, guess what? And so I started understanding also this whole notion of getting attached to. And so I had been very attached to this thing about maybe I didn't have much to offer. What did it matter? Kind of this low-level depression. I've been pretty attached to it. It became part of a kind of an identity. I wouldn't have been able to say that at the time. And then to realize I have a choice. And really, this was the beginning for me of having real choice in how I thought, how I felt, how I sensed myself, how I looked at other people in the world. And I'd done decades worth actually of inner work. I've worked with lots of spiritual teachers. I've done work that really was profound for me, but nothing touched me like this did, and opened up my life. And then as a result, I've been able to help other people open into their lives and move more internally into what is happening here. And what if that's not you? What if that is just, these are patterns related to a particular way of being in the world. They're neurological, biological, physical, mental, somatic, but they're not a life sentence. They can be changed with presence, with paying attention, with intention. There are many ways of supporting that shift so that we can move from the way that we were boxed in to a much more expansive experience of ourselves and others around us.
You raise a really interesting question in my mind, and that is, if I were to take an Enneagram questionnaire now, would it shift over time?
Well, this is a very interesting question that you raise. I'm not big on assessments
Mhm.
for a number of reasons, and we can go into that, but if we want. But does it shift? Um, for those of your listeners, viewers that may not know this, the Enneagram identifies like 9 orientations to life
Mhm.
that affect every level of our being. Okay. And we are pretty much neurologically wired for that particular orientation, not only in our physical being, but in our more elevated experience, our more expansive experience, our higher nature. So there is a kind of there is a real alignment with that. But that is the key. What may not change, what may change, is how we respond to a questionnaire, because not um, when we're seeing ourselves or experiencing ourselves in a more expansive way, if we've been doing a lot of work with it, Pat. So, you may, for example, I would say, I used to say, oh, I am a type. Now I say, I am dominant in the 9,
Mhm.
the Enneagram 9. Does that mean I am a 9? No, because there's so many other dimensions of me. But the 9 showed me where my aching pain was, and what really was keeping me, held me down. That was when the personality, I was in the grip of the personality. So the more we release some of those patterns that are associated with a particular area of consciousness, particular set of patterns,
Mhm.
then the more that we're free from thinking, oh, I am just a this, and the more present we are, and the more we can live a fuller life and respond to what is calling us in life. So no, it probably won't change. That's a long way around, but there's a reason for that, because it's not a static description.
Mhm.
If we're really, the patterns show us how our personality operates. And so, for me, to realize, oh, the sense of depression, not having worth, not mattering in life, all that is related to the 9. But is that who I am? No, those are just coping mechanisms. Our patterns are coping mechanisms. So this is why it's so exciting. When I tell people, no, you're not your personality, and they look kind of like, huh? What are you talking about? And it's like, no, because our personality patterns are coping mechanisms, and there's so much more to us. And those coping mechanisms have been important. But if you take an assessment around your 20s, let's say early 20s,
Mhm.
that tends to be when we're most in the grip of our personality, and we can stay there forever, if we want. But if things are opening up and we're learning more about ourselves, and we're responding in new ways, and we're discovering what else is within us, it's possible, then um, you may respond differently to a questionnaire, but it still probably will show up. It'll show up less as like a pronounced type, and maybe more even.
Mhm. No, I like what you said about a dominant type. I think that's a really good description because I took one of your questionnaires, and when I read the descriptions, I was really between 2 types. The dominant type definitely described me best, but there was another type that also really described another piece of me.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you about that because and I think you've answered it, because I found that really interesting. I think you can find something to relate to in all the types, frankly.
Some of us can. That's true. Uh, for some people, if they're dominant in a different type than the one I was talking about in the 9, they might not relate to a lot of other types. It depends on amount of space, how tightly we're holding on to the patterns,
Mhm.
identify them as like, yeah, this is who I am, you know. But the truth is, you're right. We have all the different aspects around the circle of 9 different ways of being in the world. We have all of those within us. Some of them are going to be more hidden, but because, and this is part of the beautiful complexity of the Enneagram, is that we are also we have a type on each side of us that we might respond to or relate to.
Mhm.
We have 2 other types, areas of consciousness, that we naturally go to under certain circumstances. And then there's just maybe another type or two that feels really familiar to us. So it's interesting. People who are dominant in certain types will relate to a broader range of types than others.
Excuse me. No, I find that fascinating. Before we started recording, we were talking about the Enneagram as being an entree into more heartfelt living. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, because what we have just been talking about is like trying to identify, you know, where might I land on this map? And what we're invited to do in this work is to come into greater contact with other centers of intelligence within us. So the heart center is one that we've may have not given much attention to or have ignored. You know, um, the heart is such a tender area, and we carry a lot of life in the heart, and some of it has never been released, some of it has never been expressed, and some of it is we just don't even maybe know about. But as we begin to connect more to this center of energy, to a center of intelligence, to the center of truth about who we are, this is the center of truth. It allows us to not only respect ourselves more, to care for ourselves more, be more compassionate, be more generous, have more generous and be more grateful, be more humble, um, but also to share that with others. So it takes something to come into contact with our hearts, Pat, doesn't it? You know, it's like this is tender territory. And, um, you know, I've had clients who said, I don't know if I have a heart. And that is from really not trusting this heart because it can feel much messier than our supposedly, and I just say that
Mhm.
supposedly logical mind, which is often not logical. Yeah. Um, yeah, I had a really interesting experience. I was in South Korea teaching, and I had about 100 people in the room, and we started focusing on the heart. We were spending whole half a day on the heart center and exploring it, doing exercises around it, connecting with it. And I always suggest that, you know, when we're talking about the heart, it even helps to put a few fingers in the middle of your
Mhm.
chest or
Yeah.
your hand on the heart, just to kind of let it know, yeah, I'm here with you. You know, I'm here. And toward the end of that session, there was a young woman. A lot of people, you know, spoke, and this was all translated. You know, the whole retreat was translated back and forth between Korean and English. And she stood up and she said, I just realized I have a heart.
Oh, wow.
And the room was just still. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And of course, she had tears running down her face and she sat down kind of quickly. It's like it was a big moment for her to say that and to say that publicly. And she, you know, you could just feel the appreciation and the resonance in the room that people it open I know that that helped open other people's hearts to themselves as well. And so what an incredible service she was, how to not only herself but to others in sharing that. But that is so a truth that so many people live with. I don't even know if I have one because it's not culturally approved area of attention. You know, how much heart can you have in your certain kind of work environment? You know, or how much do you trust it? Because you know, there's different stages of the heart, and we could maybe talk about that at a different
Yeah.
time, Pat. Um, but there's different ways of like which heart are we talking about? And so as we learn that, as we open more and more and more to our hearts, and then begin to release the 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 blockage or the obstacle, and that could be fears, that could be not trusting. It can be I've been hurt before. I don't want to open my heart because I don't want to be hurt again. Which to the head makes sense, but of course it's so untrue because the more we keep close to ourselves and to others, the less real joy, the less aliveness, the less we have of ourselves. And this is such a powerful energy within us. You know that they say that this Heart Math Institute has done a lot of
Yeah, I was just
research
thinking
here.
about that.
Yeah. And,
Oh, no,
I
go ahead,
was
and explain heart math because a lot of people don't know about
yeah,
it.
they do all this research on the energy of the heart, how it works, and one of the things, and I just heard this recently, and I don't think it's really brand new, but it was like, oh my gosh, that the energy of the heart actually can circle the circumference of the Earth, 250,000 miles. It's the same energy that the distance to the moon. That's how powerful the heart energy is when it's opened and available. And and they've done studies with people meditating and what's happening in their heart, all kinds of scientific studies, which affirms what a lot of the spiritual teachers and mystics have shared with us, that this is really a center of truth, of knowing ourselves, of healing, of compassion, of kindness. And how much of that do we need in the world? We are really lacking that.
Our
And,
world encourages linear and material accomplishment,
yeah.
and that's almost the antithesis of really living a heartfelt life.
Well, there are two different kinds of intelligences, and our particular paradigm of living in the West is that this is what's most important: is this mental intelligence, IQ. But this is the also been talked about as EQ, emotional
Mhm.
intelligence, and really this depth of study with the heart that Heart Math is doing and others is like it's way beyond EQ. It's this tremendous it has this tremendous potential for helping to bring healing into the world, for helping us recognize ourselves as real human beings. And it doesn't work intellectually, it doesn't work logically.
No.
It's not linear, and it sometimes is confusing. It's sometimes confusing. And it's not just about how we feel, there's a we can go deeper into our heart actually and experience a deeper resonance with the nature of who we are.
Yeah, I think one of the things they look for, and they look to record is coherence.
Yes.
And, that is not at all linear, and it is it's a confluence of heart, soul, mind, and all this together. I wanna ask you, how does this parlay into intuition?
Oh, well, so I just invite, if I could invite your listeners
Mhm.
into this, having an experience here that, um, just connecting. Uh, and if you're in a place you can have your feet on the ground, connect with your feet, connect to your feet, sense the connection between your feet and the earth itself and the ground that it might be a floor, but the ground that you're in contact with. And allow that to become a sensation, not a thought, but it's really a sensation. You start to recognize, oh, yeah, I sense myself in my feet in a way. And then coming into, up through your legs. This is really quick, so it doesn't really reflect the truth of what happens. But just allowing those sensations, allowing awareness to come into your legs, allowing awareness to come into your hips, noticing what's holding you as you sit. Maybe notice your sit spells. And so anybody that's been a meditator probably will resonate with this, in some way, that can just settling in to where you're sitting and to that contact with your chair, the sofa, the bed, the floor, whatever you're sitting on. But setting into it and setting into yourself and allowing those sensations to come into focus so that you're really in your hips. You're really in contact with this chair. And then you're bringing that attention up to your pelvic area. We call it the belly center. And it's a center of energy. And that center of energy is really, just kind of is really right below here's my navel. It's right below the navel. Okay. Sometimes it's called the lower dantian or the hara. And just bringing attention into that space. It took me a long time to find this in myself, Pat, that center, this belly center. But relaxing, like there's nothing to make happen here, just relaxing into it. The center of this energy is related to how we ground in our lives, how we ground and anchor into our substance, into our physicality. And then bringing that attention up to our heart center. And actually, I have my hand on my belly and my heart center right now. And just inviting yourself into that space of your heart. And just notice what's happening, just breathing. Allowing whatever might be arising. So we're not trying to force anything. We're allowing ourselves to be in this experience, this human experience. We're connecting with ourselves in another way. That begins then to open us up a little more to ourselves, to deepen our connection. This is part of coming home to ourselves, this part of this process. And then we can also bring attention to our head center and just notice, inviting in quiet, inviting in stillness, and knowing that ideas and all kinds of things still go through, but you don't have to grasp them. You can let them flow. Just noticing what's happening here. Just inviting in awareness of this head space, head center. So this head center of intelligence is not the busy mind, it's the quieting mind, the spacious mind that allows in new ideas, new thoughts, new awarenesses, new insights, new hits. And the more that these are in attunement with one another, in coherence with one another, we are more of a channel, we are more open, we are able to be more receptive through all these all these centers, and some of us receive more information through our belly, actually. Some of us receive more information through our heart. Some of us receive more information coming in through our quiet head center, our quieting head center. It's more spacious. It's not hanging on to everything. Just like
Yeah.
our heart isn't hanging on to every feeling we have. We're fluid human beings, we're dynamic human beings, and we're allowing this life and this information to come into us and to see what we're attuned to. I think of ourselves as I love music. I love almost every kind, but I love chamber music. I love strings. And whether it's classical or like wildly adventurous new music, that are almost like a stringed instrument. It's like there's a chord in here. There's a string that we can just kind of pluck. It's like, ah, that's it. That's my note. And so the heart is part of intuition, as are, from my perspective, are these other centers, which are all provide us with amazing sources of intelligence that the busy mind cannot do. It has its place when we're trying to balance a checkbook, or we're trying to analyze ROI, but it's not for the whole of our life. It gets in the way.
Now, I find intuition to be fascinating because I think if most of us look back over our lives, the intuitive decisions we've made have worked out one way or another. It's when we've ignored our intuition that things have not worked out.
Yeah. Oh, that is so true. I sure have experienced that for myself and later go, why didn't I pay attention? And so that's the reason I say I've been hard to get through to, because I've had to have these other ways of like, this is your work. That was said very gently. Um, the thing about, I think why we don't pay attention to intuition is it's often quieter. It often arises from a place that we might not spend a lot of time paying attention to. And we're so busy. And as we get busy, we tense up and we tense down, and our systems close more. We're more like, we get really focused on something, and we get restricted in what we can take in. And so as we learn, this is so counterintuitive to the Western way of being, Western world paradigm. But if we can learn to really relax into ourselves, relax the patterns that say, oh, but first you have to do this. Oh, but now this. Oh, but I'm feeling this way. But those are patterns. And if we can learn to breathe into them, say, yeah, I see you here, not needed right now. That is a big cue. It's a big way into intuition, into being able to even hear it. And what's so interesting is that, to me, very interesting, it's so much easier to trust what comes from the outside
Hmm.
than what comes from the inside. And that's really not what is intended. We might get some good information from the outside, but what comes from the inside, how do we learn to trust that?
And I think, particularly in this Western world, we need to cultivate that and cultivate the components of that, being in touch with our heart, learning I think meditation is game changing personally, because until you can witness your thoughts, you can't make a conscious decision.
Yes, that's right. And we are so not a choice when we are caught up in our patterns.
Yeah.
And that's one of the gifts of the Enneagram, is showing us patterns that are really not who we are. It's just what we've become accustomed to and take for granted. It's like, well, that's just how I am. That's just how life is. And so we have so many ideas, so many constructs about how life is and what we should do and what we should be and how we should express ourselves and when it's okay to to trust and believe in ourselves. You know, we have a big inner critic, most of us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that inner critic is one of the things that tamps us down. What it does is, and I've studied this a lot and taught this a lot because it's such a powerful component within our personality system. So we are expansive beings, everyone. We're expansive. We have so much potential, so much potentiality that lives within us. And the gifts that we have to bring forward are phenomenal and needed in this world. And the critic goes, no, but that's not who you are. That's not who you are. You're supposed to be like this. And it constricts how it thinks we should be. And the more we try, the more we're on a growth path, a development path, a path of inspiration and opening, the more it tries to go, no, 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 no. And it is actually acting as a protector because it's what does not trust the inner knowing. It's what doesn't trust. So one piece of my work that, and in fact, I have a whole long chapter in the Deep Living with the Enneagram book on changing your relationship to the inner critic. That's key. So is relaxing our patterns once we are aware of them is key, and changing our relationship to the inner critic, because that's really what gets in the way of our intuition. No, don't listen to that. That's way off. Because if it doesn't fit into the normal confines, the inner critic's confines of how we're supposed to be, then it's dangerous. It feels dangerous, and I've got to protect her from that. So, we can say, thank you very much. I heard your message, and I don't really need it right now because this is so true for me. Go out and clean off the leaves in the tree.
I would say, though, that inner critic isn't really us. It is all the limitations that people have put on us, our parents, our schools, our society, our bosses, our perceived place in the world. And until we start to peel back those layers, we're not going to get down to who we really are as
Yeah.
expansive people.
Yeah. One of the things that I ask people to do when they're maybe not even recognizing that, oh, this is the inner critic at work. Someone will be talking about their situation. I'll say, what did you just hear? Well, I just said, that I can't do this. And I said, say that again. What's the basis? What's the source of that sentence? Where did that come from? Because it's the inner critic. It's the inner critic that says, I can't, or you can't, And so I'll ask, trace back. Where did you hear that voice before? Was that from a parent? Was that from a minister? Was that from an authoritarian teacher? Was that from, your classmates? I mean, we pick up messages. You're right.
Absolutely.
Those external messages become internalized, and then we think that they are ours. And the inner critic isn't even a real thing. We just give it a ton of power because we think it's true. It's one of those things that we attach to. Well, I can't do that because, I said, well, why not? I'm hearing I can't do it. That's out of bounds. Can we question that? Let's explore that more. Let's see if it's really true.